Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Mike Durant has some serious questions to answer. Also, Nick Saban, once again, makes sense. And what are they talking about at the Statehouse?
I'm talking about form. I'm talking about content. I'm talking about interrelationships. I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven. Do you understand? Finally!
Oh, that? All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and today I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and Josh Moon, investigative reporter and columnist at APR. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Josh, you and I broke a story over at APR this week, and I have to say, you and I have been in this business more than a minute. And
Yeah.
It was one of the most sickening stories that we've ever had to report. And what it is, and I'm going to let you talk more about it, Josh, but Mike Durant, U.S. Senate candidate from here in Alabama, we discovered that his father, Leon Durant, had molested Mike Durant's sister for over a decade. Mike Durant, at some point, became aware that this had happened to his sister, and then he went on a news show and said that it never happened, that his sister was making it up. And even though his sister then, through her attorney, released 2 letters from Mike Durant in which he acknowledged that his father had confessed to him that he had molested his sister over a number of years, and Mike Durant is still not answering questions on why he did not stand up for his sister when she was molested by their father. Josh, if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, it's one of the weirder things that I've ever encountered. I mean, he clearly so the letters that he sent they occurred in '91. Shortly thereafter, he was obviously taken a prisoner of war in Mogadishu in Somalia, and then after his release was when his sister filed a lawsuit against their father. Because they had entered into an agreement in which the father would not do certain things, not be around certain people, also would go to therapy for what had taken place because, as she had said, he molested her from the time that she was a toddler up until she was 19 years old. And at times, for a period there, she said it was nearly every single day. And so these letters that Durant sent his sister said very clearly that he had approached his father about this, and without even asking, his father admitted to it, started crying and saying it was all true, and he's talked about how sickening the whole ordeal was and how upset he was about this in those letters. And then 3 or 4 years later, on a news program, a TV news program, he comes out and says that his sister is essentially making it all up to grab headlines, that she's suing him for $5 million, and she's obviously got some things going on that she needs to work through, and that none of this is true, and he's a great father. And the complete disconnect to those things has never been explained. The AP tried to get an explanation from him, which the stories were reported by the Associated Press at the time, and he never really gave anything. He declined to comment, and then said, "Well, that's for the courts to figure out." And they eventually settled out of court over the federal lawsuit that she filed. But it's one of the weirder things I've ever seen, and it's just there's never been any explanation for it. And I've spoken to his sister, and this, I mean, this had a profound effect on her life, and it destroyed her life, and as you can imagine, it would, and she struggled for years, and pretty much her entire family, including Mike Durant, abandoned her on this, and it's just unbelievable to me.
Susan, this is a man who has built a career on being a war hero, a stand-up guy. He says that he's going to fight for Alabama if he's elected senator from our state. How in the name of all that's good and holy, can a guy who denied his sister, who turned his back on his own flesh and blood when she was molested by his father, how in the world is this man going to stand up for Alabama when he wouldn't stand up for his sister?
This is one of the most disgusting stories in all the years I've been in news that I've encountered. And like you said, if he can't stand up for his own sister, this would have been a much better story in his history of being a war hero had he stood up for his sister instead of standing up for his dad. It would have played out much better in his career path. But if he's not going to stand up for his sister, how the heck do we know that he's going to actually stand up for us as Alabamians in the Senate? I don't get it. I mean, I'm utterly disgusted by this. Words don't have it. But I got to tell you this. I don't know how they handle this in New Hampshire, but let me tell you how we handle pedophiles in our families in Alabama. We call it family gathering, and we beat them just short of death. So they have to live with knowing it.
Josh, I mean, well said, Susan. I mean, every woman we have talked to has been outraged to the point of near tears and violence. But here you spoke with Mike Durant's sister, Mary, and he tried to paint her as a crazy person. And your conversations, and you look on her Facebook page, this is a very caring woman who's had trouble, but she's trying to help other people through, she's a nurse, she practices some other therapies
She's a Reiki
and things.
master, she's an artist.
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this, Josh, and how does a man deny his sister? You and I both looked at his books. I mean, in his books, he talks about what a great guy his dad is.
Never mentions he has a sister. Never mentions in 3 books that he has a sister.
I don't, like I said, it's such a confusing, such a confusing apparent sellout of him, that he believed. I assumed that this was a better story. Listen, and here is a lot of this is speculation, certainly because Mike Durant has never addressed this. And he had plenty of opportunities, as we mentioned. He's got 3 books out. He's never talked about it in these things. Reporters, I tried to get somebody to tell me from either him or his campaign to say, what's the story here, man? Why did you have such an about face? Did something happen? Did something change? I can't imagine what it would be. But there was no explanation for this. I mean, the explanation that the campaign gave, that he wasn't involved, no one ever said he was involved in the actual abuse of his sister. For God's sakes, that's not the story. The story here is that he found out about this and was seemingly going to be headed down the pathway of being a caring brother. If you read those letters, that's what it was. Listen, I'm here. He kept telling her, I'm here. If you give me enough notice, I'll come by and I'll even give you a hug. And, but I'm always here to talk, and it's disgusting to me. And I'm so sorry for what happened. And then that led to just a few years later with no change in circumstance at all for them.
Hey, we're going to have to take this over to the next segment.
Okay, good.
We're going to have to flip over to the next segment. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more on Mike Durant.
Alabama spent $700 million to create 4,000 jobs at an auto manufacturing plant. Now, legislators have an opportunity to generate $700 million a year and create 12,000 jobs without spending any tax dollars. The equivalent of 3 auto manufacturing plants, if they just let us vote on a gaming and lottery bill this November. Call 855-GAMING-1 to contact your legislators today.
My dog Jupiter is frightened when I climb too high. The owl said.
Check for monsters, Daddy.
I did, honey. There are no monsters. You're perfectly safe.
Protect yourself and those you love. Vaccinate now.
So you got caught speeding. But this time you got more than a ticket.
What are you in for?
Vehicular homicide.
Stop speeding before speeding stops you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, I know I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
That's all right.
The thing that in his book, Susan, he talks about what a hero has gotten, what a role model his dad was. I don't think anybody that molests children is any type of role model. Now, I mean, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I find it interesting also that all the court records around this have been destroyed. But back to that point, in that you and Josh and I spent hours going over and over what could be his motive for this. Why would he do this? Why would he deny this? Why would he take his father? And it just baffled us. And the only thing we really got down to when we were looking at his books and how much his dad was a war hero and his uncles and grandfather and whoever, the only thing we could come down to was he wanted that legacy of being a war hero from a war hero family. Now, how selfish is that? That you can't support your sister, that you can't, it's so important to you to have your war hero, sorry, I'm really upset, war hero legacy, that you would deny the basic comfort to your sister. I don't understand it.
Josh, you know, we there's a psychology here that is beyond my comprehension. But I do want to run back to something you mentioned. When we got a response from the Durant's team, it was the most incoherent, all over the map statement I have ever seen. It bordered on campaign malpractice. But the one thing that they did do is said that this story was coming from career politicians. Now, as far as I know, you and I are not politicians. The last time I checked. We are career journalists, but not politicians. So Mo Brooks responded and said, because he is a career politician, said, I had nothing to do with the story.
Right.
Now, I think anybody that knows the three of us knows that we do not have Mo Brooks on speed dial.
No.
And Mo Brooks doesn't, like, talk to us and
What are you
feed us
talking about?
stories.
He was over for dinner last night at my house. What do you mean?
I mean, it's so ridiculous. These days, when you do a legitimate news story, they always want to point like there's some politician behind it. Mo Brooks was not behind the story, nor Katie Britt, nor any other politician.
No politician had anything to do with investigative reporting.
What? But it's not even. You know, it's even simpler than that. I mean, the Associated Press reported all this. You know what I mean? We simply went back and found the old art. And if you do a Google search for Mike Durant, I mean, it's some of the things that pop up there are about this story. I think, you know, there are some stories that are missing that have kind of been scrubbed off the internet. But you know, that's where this came from. It's not a mystery. There's no curtain with some wizard behind it. It's the Associated Press who reported this.
The one thing that we've all been amazed by is that the donors didn't do a background check. His campaign staff didn't do a background check before accepting the check from his campaign. Nobody has found, and it's a Google search. It's so stinking simple.
Josh, well, if you Google Mike Durant now, the first story that comes up is the one you and I put out there.
Well,
that's the first
I mean,
thing.
that's the, you know, I think there are a lot of people today that have read that thing, and rightfully so. I mean, it's just a befuddling story for somebody who was seemingly, you know, I've been on this very program saying I thought Mike Durant was a good guy. You know, I've heard from a lot of people about what a good dude he was and how they liked him and how his employees liked him and you know, how he was a progressive kind of thinker guy. And you know, it really, honestly, part of the reason for doing the story for me was I wanted to know what happened, you know, and there's no explanation for it that has been given, none.
Certainly no excuse.
The thing that hit me about this is I had one political operative contact me and say, well, you know, everything gets dug up from the past, and this is terrible when campaigns, you know, stuff gets dug up. And I'm like, this goes to character. If you will abide by your father sexually molesting your sister, what else will you tolerate? You know?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I mean, it's just, yes, it speaks to, you know, whether or not you can believe him, or, you know, who is he in this for? You know, and those are very fair questions. It's no different to me than somebody that, you know, that has a criminal record or in the past. You know, matter of fact, it may be worse than some of the criminal records that we've dealt with.
You know, there's a reason to steal food sometimes. There's a reason. Yeah. There is never a reason to protect a child molester. There's never a reason. I wish I knew what the Republican Party is going to do about this. Are they just going to ignore it? Is that what John Wall and those guys do? Because I just can't imagine them ignoring. But they may.
Oh, they may.
I mean, do Republican voters okay with child molesters?
I can tell you.
know what?
Not child molesters, but people who defend child molesters.
I can tell
quite a
you
bit
this,
of them voted for Roy Moore. I'll remind you of that.
That's true. But I guarantee you,
That was
Republican
different.
women,
It was different.
the Republican women, I don't think are going to abide this at all.
Well, anyway, we could devote a whole show to the failings of Mike Durant towards his sister, and Mr. Leon Durant is dead and in his grave. What a hell of a legacy. Governor Kay Ivey called a special session to spend about little less than $800 million. Josh, they're telling us it's for broadband, water and sewage, and hospitals, nursing homes, etc.
Yeah. Well, I hope everybody keeps a very close eye on that. Because I have heard some stories already of things that have been introduced that were pet projects for a handful of people that didn't benefit hardly anyone other than a few donors of theirs. And so I'm hopeful that people pay attention to what's going on, and we don't get any more stories about, you know, people trying to dredge up a marina so certain donors can get yachts in and whatnot.
Right.
You know, that's the sort of thing that I want people to pay attention to. And if you don't, they're going to misspend your money.
What they're going to do is going to big shiny ball over here, broadband. My little project.
Yeah.
Well, and they do it all the time. You got to watch the details. You got to pay close attention to the details.
The thing that always gets me is who all is going to get the money and who all potentially is going to go to jail. But going to jail these days for taking the money doesn't happen as often. But we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics.
You'll never guess what 400,000 people in the U.S. were using when they crashed their cars last year. No, not this. This. Distracted driving will kill you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
My dog Jupiter is frightened when I climb too high, the owl said.
Check for monsters, Daddy.
I did, honey. There are no monsters. You're perfectly safe.
Protect yourself and those you love. Vaccinate now.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, down at the Statehouse, you got lobbyists by the droves, citizens in the building, which they should be allowed in. I think they messed up by not allowing them in. But you also have Omicron, the COVID variant that seems to know no boundaries.
You do. You have 140 legislators. You've got their staff. You've got the support staff. You've got the lobbyists. You've got the citizens. It's a petri dish, folks. I mean, the House members on Tuesday, there were only 68 members there out of 105. 5 we know were sick. Where were the other 30 plus?
I mean, Josh, I'm being told don't go in the building unless you absolutely have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were. I talked to people who were there, and they were talking about dozens of people who were suspected of being sick or exposed. And and that's how Omicron is, man. You spend a little time outside, and you've been exposed more than likely. And I think at this point we're quickly approaching the point where it's either you've had Omicron or you haven't tested for it. Right. So it's bad there, and hopefully we don't have some people become critically ill out of this.
Well, we want them to stay safe. They've got a big job to do, even though sometimes we criticize how they do
Certainly.
it.
Yeah, this is it's all politics stuff. We certainly don't wish anybody any ill will at all.
No,
but let's not forget we have a senator whose wife is on an iron lung.
Okay, no, she's artificial. We hope that people are staying healthy and no one.
Let's not forget how serious this is.
Nick Saban made some news recently, not for losing to Georgia, which we won't bring up on this program because it's a terrible thing, but Josh, he dared sign a letter that called on Senator Joe Manchin to support the voting rights bill.
It as an Auburn fan, it really, really pains me how much I'm liking Nick Saban these days. He's. But I'll say, honestly, I will say this: throughout his history, if you watch Nick Saban speak on social issues that he has spent some time exploring, what his response is almost always unique and almost always well informed. And something worth listening to for people. He is really, really good at these things. And I think that this one, I happen to agree with him on a lot of his stances. I'm not saying he's a liberal, but maybe he is. But I think he and I both care about the overwhelming population of people in this country. And I think we both recognize the importance of voting rights. And I think we both recognize that over the last year, some people have spent some time knocking down voting rights in this country. And there's something that needs to be done at the federal level. Congress has that power. It is appointed to them in the Constitution to do so. And I think what he wrote to them is very, very, very important. He qualified that by saying he is not a supporter of getting rid of the filibuster, which I'm not either. But I do think that it could be carved out in this particular instance. If we can carve it out for Supreme Court justices, we should be able to carve it out for voting rights.
Yeah.
And voting rights, you brought up him being a liberal. We're talking about voting. Mm-hmm. Voting. It shouldn't be liberal or conservative. No. Yeah. It's a basic right in the Constitution that we have. It should not be an issue on either side of the aisle.
And I don't believe, what I believe? I think that Nick Saban is practical, and he's a man who has spent years and years and years in the homes of young men who are not of privilege, who, because of their unique skills and their abilities, have climbed, many of them, to the pinnacle of athletic careers. And he's seen these young men from a very early age, and they also know the struggles that poorer families have to deal with, or black families have to deal with. So when he is pro voting rights, when he is pro Black Lives Matter, when he is pro vaccines, it's because it's practical.
Yes. Yes. That's all you can say about this with him is it is very, you listen to his explanation, and I guarantee you that if you sit down and talk to Nick Saban about this, there's not a single person out there who could argue with him on the facts and on the merits of that argument that he makes. There's nobody that could do it. He's just, he's that, it's a thoughtful process, and everybody knows from his coaching, that what he does is thoughtful and well planned and devised. And that's the same way that he handles a lot of the social issues as well.
If our lawmakers would take the same approach to governing as Nick Saban takes to playing football, we would not be dead last in the nation. We would be near the top or number one. He's taking the basic principles of that sport, which apply to life in a lot of ways, and then applying them. If we would apply, be the best, practice, work hard, those things are just simple Oh, God. Well, let's move on to somebody who doesn't work hard and doesn't govern and doesn't know what the heck they're talking
Oh,
about.
God. Can he not just go away?
Ex-state senator Bill Williams, affectionately known in the statehouse as
Nita Meyer.
from the film.
Of course, he didn't know if that was good or bad. That was the funny part, yeah.
Anyway, he attacked Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin for his pardons for progress. Now, never mind, he wrote this column and he misspelled pardons for progress. We didn't expect him to be any literary genius. I mean, we didn't expect that. I mean, this is a guy who was criticizing Randall Woodfin, Mayor Woodfin, who's one of the best mayors that we've ever had, doing a great job, for a program that lets people who committed misdemeanor marijuana
low-level
offenses
drug offenses. Yeah.
to come back and ask for a pardon, right?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that, Josh?
Nothing. Nothing in the world is wrong with that. Except for Phil Williams gets to paint this as a black mayor letting black inmates out of prison for something, black criminals out of prison or something.
Right.
Which I will remind you, I believe Mr. Williams needed a pardon at one point himself. I mean, he was dangerously close to needing one, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to Robert Bentley, that didn't happen. But
Right.
yeah, he was, and a big crime, not just a misdemeanor. Okay?
Well, anyway, he skated by. He didn't get popped. But we're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.